The galactic tribunal of arbitration had stood for 11,000 years. Its halls stretched impossibly wide, a cathedral of justice carved from the living heart of a neutron star's crystallized remnants. Pillars of compressed matter rose toward a ceiling lost in perpetual twilight, each column inscribed with the legal codes of 17 founding civilizations. The air itself hummed with the weight of history, thick with the electromagnetic signatures of countless verdicts, countless sentences, countless species brought to their knees before the majesty of galactic law. To stand in the great chamber was to stand in the presence of order itself. The tribunal had ended wars. It had dissolved empires. It had, on 3 separate occasions, authorized the complete extinction of species deemed too dangerous to coexist with civilized life. Its word was absolute, its authority unquestioned. And today, for the first time in living memory, it would render judgment upon humanity. High Arbiter Kethvorin descended from his magistrate's throne on threads of gravitational manipulation, his serpentine form coiling with practiced elegance. 6 E3 pairs arranged vertically along his elongated skull surveyed the assembled witnesses with cold satisfaction. His scales, each one a photoreceptive organ capable of reading electromagnetic fluctuations, shimmered with the deep purple of judicial authority. Behind him, the other 6 arbiters took their positions, the insectoid crystallarch of the hive concordance clicking mandibles in rhythmic patterns of legal notation. The gaseous ambassador, Vel, contained within a diplomatic pressure suit that wheezed with each pronouncement, and for others each representing the founding powers of the galactic accords. Before them, separated by a void of pure darkness that served as both barrier and symbol, stood the accused. Commander Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Defense Force. She was unremarkable by galactic standards. Soft skin, bilateral symmetry, 2 eyes, both facing forward in the configuration of a predator species. Her uniform a simple affair of black fabric with minimal insignia seemed almost primitive against the bioluminescent robes of the assembled dignitaries. And yet, as High Arbiter Kethvorin studied her, he felt something he had not experienced in 700 years of judicial service. Uncertainty. The charges have been read, he announced, his voice carrying through translation matrices that rendered his words in 17,000 languages simultaneously. Humanity stands accused of unauthorized intervention in the sovereign affairs of the Dreth hegemony, of providing military assistance to a species designated for controlled integration, of violating 17 articles of the Galactic Accords regarding pre-development civilizations, and most grievously, he paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle like snow on stone, of the destruction of a hegemony enforcement fleet, 47 vessels, 12,000 Dreth warriors, annihilated in what human records describe as the translation matrix, struggled with the next words, finally rendering them with audible confusion. A minor border incident. A murmur rippled through the assembled witnesses. Representatives from over 200 species filled the observation galleries, their collective attention fixed upon the small humans standing alone in the defendant's circle. Some had traveled for months to witness this moment. Others had been watching via quantum-linked consciousness streams from the far edges of known space. All of them wanted to see how humanity would answer for its crimes. Commander Vasquez remained motionless. Her hands were clasped behind her back in a posture that galactic behavioral analysts had identified as parade rest, a human military stance indicating calm readiness. Her face betrayed nothing, no fear, no anger, no signs of the groveling submission that typically characterized species facing tribunal judgment. The Dreth ambassador, a massive figure of chitin and rage named Gorthax, the Inevitable, rose from his delegation's platform. His war mandibles spread wide in a gesture of formal accusation. "The evidence is overwhelming," he thundered. "Humanity has admitted to the destruction of our fleet. They have made no attempt to deny their interference in our rightful acquisition of the Pelori system. They have shown no remorse, offered no reparations, and have his mandibles clicked in patterns of barely restrained fury. They have sent a single officer to answer for crimes against the galaxy's third-largest military power." He turned to face the observation galleries, playing to the audience with practiced theatrical rage. "This is humanity's answer to justice." One woman, alone, unarmed, The murmur became a rumble. Several species, those who had dealt with the Dreth before, and learned to fear them, began calculating the political implications of what was clearly a human insult. High Arbiter Kethveron raised a manipulator limb, and silence fell like a blade. The tribunal acknowledges the Dreth hegemony's concerns, he said. However, ancient protocols demand that the accused be permitted to speak in their own defense before sentence is rendered. Commander Vasquez, 6 eyes fixed upon her. You have been granted the right of representation. Why does humanity send only you? For the first time since the proceedings began, Commander Vasquez moved. She shifted her weight slightly, a gesture so subtle that most species failed to register it. But those watching closely, those with predator instincts of their own, recognized it for what it was: the settling of tension before action. With respect, High Arbiter, she said, humanity didn't send just me. She smiled, and in observation galleries across the chamber, hearts that had never known fear began to beat faster. Ambassador Gorthax's mandibles spread in what the translation matrices rendered as laughter. A single human warrior claims to be more than she appears, he announced to the galleries. How typical of the species. Earth's population is measured in the single billions. Their fleet, if it can be called such numbers, fewer than 800 vessels. Their colonial holdings span a mere 47 systems, most of them barren rocks, barely worth the fuel to reach them. He turned to face the arbiters directly. I have reviewed their military capabilities personally. Their most advanced weapons are primitive kinetic launchers and crude nuclear devices. Their defensive technologies are generations behind even the most backward hegemony client states. The fleet they destroyed, my fleet, was a patrol group. Second-line vessels crewed by training cadres and garrison troops. His warm mandibles clicked a pattern of amused contempt. They surprised us. I admit this freely. The attack was unexpected, and our warriors were not prepared for combat. But the tribunal should not mistake a lucky ambush for genuine military capability. Humanity won a battle through deception and cowardice. They cannot win a war. High Arbiter, Kethveron. Scales flickered with judicial neutrality. The tribunal notes the Dreth assessment. However, the purpose of these proceedings is not to evaluate military strength, but to render judgment on the violation of galactic accords. Then, let me simplify the proceedings. Gorthax gestured to his aide, a smaller Dreth who scuttled forward, carrying a containment case half as large as Commander Vasquez herself. The hegemony invokes the right of strength, silence, absolute, frozen silence. Even the quantum-linked consciousness streams seemed to pause, as billions of beings across the galaxy processed what had just been spoken. The right of strength was ancient. It predated the tribunal itself, a remnant of the wars that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization before the founding of the Accords. It was rarely invoked, and for good reason. The right allowed an accusing party to settle matters of dispute through single combat, with the outcome legally binding and permanently beyond appeal. In 11,000 years, it had been used only 17 times. The accused had never survived. High Arbiter Kethveron's scales flushed with the grey of deep concern. Ambassador, the right of strength is a relic of less civilized times. The tribunal strongly advises the right is the right. Gorthax interrupted. It is codified in the original accords, signed by your predecessor, High Arbiter. It cannot be denied, only refused. And if humanity refuses, his mandibles spread wide. Then they admit their guilt and accept the standard penalty for military aggression against a founding power. Commander Vasquez remained silent, but her eyes, those strange, forward-facing predator's eyes, moved to the containment case. She studied it with an expression that the tribunal's behavioral analysts struggled to classify. Interest, not fear, not apprehension. Not the calculating assessment of threat that a rational being would display when confronted with potential death. Genuine, almost childlike curiosity. Show me, she said. Gorthax gestured, and his aide activated the containment field. The case opened to reveal the Dreth hegemony's answer to humanity's unexpected victory. A weapon engineered specifically for this moment, built from technologies that lesser species could barely comprehend. It stood nearly 9 feet tall. The Executioner-class battle chassis was a masterwork of Dreth military engineering. Crystalline armor plates, grown in the heart of a dying star, covered a frame of compressed neutronium alloys. 6 limbs each, one ending in a different weapon configuration, emerged from a central thorax housing enough firepower to level a city block. The head, if it could be called such, was a sensor cluster capable of tracking targets through solid matter, around corners, across dimensional boundaries. It was, by any objective measure, the single most dangerous combat platform the Dreth had ever created. It cost more than most species' annual military budgets, and Gorthax had brought it here specifically to kill one human. The champion of the hegemony, he announced with undisguised pride. 3 years in development. Tested against the finest warriors of 12 species, undefeated, unmatched, unbreakable. The galleries buzzed with impressed murmurs. Even those who despised the Dreth had to acknowledge the machine's terrible beauty. It represented the pinnacle of galactic weapons technology, a walking extinction event designed for a single purpose. Humanity will be permitted to select a champion of their own, Gorthax continued. They may use any weapons in their possession. They may employ any tactics within the bounds of single combat. The hegemony asks only that the combat take place immediately, before humanity has time to construct some crude imitation of our technology. He turned to face Commander Vasquez, mandibles spread in triumphant mockery. Choose your champion, human. Select your finest warrior, your most advanced weapons. Bring forth the best your primitive species can offer. Commander Vasquez studied the executioner for a long moment. Then she turned to face High Arbiter Keth Vorin. I accept the right of strength, she said. On behalf of humanity, I will serve as our champion. The galleries exploded. The uproar lasted nearly 10 minutes. Species who had traveled across the galaxy specifically to witness humanity's judgment found themselves confronting something beyond their experience. A humaner, single, unarmored, apparently unarmed human had just volunteered to face the most advanced killing machine the Dreth hegemony could create. It was, by any rational assessment, suicide. High Arbiter Keth Vorin scales cycled through 17 shades of confusion before settling on the pale blue of reluctant acceptance. Commander Vasquez, the tribunal, must advise you that the right of strength is binding unto death. There is no withdrawal once combat begins. No appeals. No mercy protocols. Are you certain you wish to proceed? I'm certain you understand that you will face the Dreth champion alone, that no weapons may be provided to you once combat begins. That High Arbiter, Commander Vasquez's voice was calm, almost gentle. I understand, I accept. I'm ready. Gorthax's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Dreth equivalent of barely suppressed laughter. The human has chosen death, rather than face the shame of refusal. How predictable. He gestured to his warriors, who began moving the executioner chassis toward the combat circle marked in the center of the chamber. The machine moved with disturbing fluidity, each step precisely calculated, every limb adjusting constantly to maintain perfect balance. Let it be recorded, the ambassador announced, that humanity sent a single female, unarmed, to face the hegemony's mightiest weapon. Let it be remembered that they chose extinction over wisdom. Commander Vasquez stepped toward the combat circle. Excuse me, she said, stopping just short of the marked boundary. Before we begin, I have a question about your champion. Gorthax's mandibles stilled. A question, yes. She pointed toward the executioner, which had taken its position on the opposite side of the circle. Is that the final version? Or is it still a prototype? The galleries went quiet again. Gorthax's war mandibles spread in confusion. What? The chassis? The weapons systems? Are they the production model, or did you rush something out because of the timeline? Commander Vasquez tilted her head, studying the machine with renewed interest. Because some of those joint configurations look like they might cause problems at full extension. And I'm pretty sure I can see heat dissipation vents on the lower thorax that would unsurvive sustained combat. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Gorthax's mandibles began clicking again. But this time, the pattern wasn't laughter. The tribunal's translation matrices struggled to render the sound, finally settling on a phrase that seemed inadequate to the situation. Outraged disbelief, you presume to critique hegemony engineering. The ambassador's voice had risen by several octaves. "You dare to question the design of our greatest weapon?" Commander Vasquez shrugged. "I'm just saying, that thermal regulation system looks like it was bolted on as an afterthought. You might want to look into that." "Enough," Gorthax's roar echoed through the chamber, rattling observation platforms and sending several of the more delicate species scrambling for shelter. "Begin the combat. Now." High Arbiter Kethvoran's scales had shifted to the pure white of utter bewilderment, but he raised his manipulator limb regardless. "The right of strength has been invoked and accepted. Let the record show that combat begins." His limb fell. Now, the executioner moved. 3 years of engineering. The combined expertise of the hegemony's finest weapons designers. Enough firepower to devastate a small moon. All of it focused on a single target, one human woman standing alone in the center of the circle. It crossed the distance in less than a second. Its primary bleeder molecular redged weapon, capable of cutting through battle armor like paper, swung in a perfect arc toward Commander Vasquez's neck and missed. She wasn't there anymore. The executioner's sensor cluster swiveled, tracking. It found her 3 meters to the left, standing perfectly still, her hands still clasped behind her back. She hadn't appeared to move at all. The machine recalculated, adjusted, launched a second attack, this time a coordinated assault from multiple limbs. Each weapon arriving at the target location from a different angle, leaving no possible route of escape. All 6 weapons struck empty air. Commander Vasquez was now standing behind the executioner, studying the heat dissipation vents she had criticized earlier. "Yeah," she said. "Definitely a design flaw. These would burn out after about 30 seconds of sustained combat." The executioner spun, weapons cycling to ranged configuration. Plasma lancers, designed to burn through starship hulls, opened fire in a continuous stream. The chamber's emergency shields engaged automatically, protecting the observation galleries from the overflow of destructive energy. When the plasma cleared, Commander Vasquez was standing exactly where she had been. Untouched, her uniform wasn't even singed. "I mean, don't get me wrong," she continued, as if discussing the weather, "the power output is impressive. But you've got no thermal management, no sustained fire capability. And your targeting algorithms are running about 3 generations behind what we'd consider acceptable." The executioner stopped. Its sensor cluster rotated through 17 different spectrum analyzers, trying to understand what it was seeing. A human. Baseline physiology. No visible augmentations. No energy shields. No apparent weapons. And yet, somehow, impossible to hit. Gorthax's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely. He stood frozen at the edge of the combat circle, watching something that his understanding of the universe insisted could not be happening. How his voice was barely a whisper. "How is this possible?" Commander Vasquez turned to face him, leaving her back exposed to the executioner. The machine launched another attacker, desperate, all-weapons assault that should have reduced her to component atoms. She stepped aside without looking. "You asked why humanity sent only me," she said. "You assumed it was because we didn't take this seriously. Because we didn't understand the threat." She began walking toward the executioner. "You were wrong." The machine backpedaled, something it had never been programmed to do. Its weapons cycled through every configuration, launching attack after attack, each one more desperate than the last. None of them came close. "We sent me because we did understand," Commander Vasquez continued. "We understood that the Dreth would invoke the right of strength. We understood that you would bring your finest weapon. We understood that the entire galaxy would be watching, waiting to see how humanity would respond to being threatened." She stopped, standing directly in front of the executioner. It loomed over her, weapons bristling, sensor cluster worry frantically. It couldn't hit her. It couldn't understand why. "And we wanted to make absolutely sure," Commander Vasquez said softly, "that everyone watching would understand something very, very important." She reached out and placed one hand on the executioner's chassis. "We're not afraid." What happened next would be debated by galactic scholars for centuries. Some said that Commander Vasquez moved too fast for even the tribunal's recording systems to capture. Others claimed she must have had hidden implants, microscopic weapons, technologies beyond anything humanity had officially declared. Very few suggested something else entirely. That what they witnessed wasn't technology at all. That it was something older, something that existed in the spaces between heartbeats, in the quiet moments before dawn, in the breath a parent takes before rushing into a burning building to save their child. Something uniquely, terrifyingly human. Commander Vasquez's hand pressed against the executioner's chassis. For a moment, less than a second, nothing happened. Then the machine came apart. Not exploded, not shattered. Came apart, like a puzzle being carefully disassembled by patient hands. Armor plates separated from the frame. Weapon systems detached and fell away. Power cores disengaged and went dark. The sensor cluster rotated once, twice, then went still as its connections to the main body were severed. In less than 10 seconds, the Dreth hegemony's greatest weapon had become a pile of components scattered across the combat circle. Commander Vasquez stood in the center of the debris, breathing normally. Her uniform was still immaculate. The champion. Gorthax's voice cracked. The champion has fallen. He turned to face the arbiters, mandibles trembling with something that looked remarkably like terror. The combat must be declared void. Human trickery. Hidden weapons. This cannot be the right of strength. High Arbiter, Kethvorin, said slowly, has been settled. His scales had shifted to a color that no member of his species had ever produced in the tribunal chamber before. It would take the behavioral analysts 3 days to identify it. The color was ore. The tribunal recognizes Commander Elena Vasquez as the victor. Under the terms of the right of strength, all charges against humanity are dismissed. The Dreth hegemony's claims are denied with prejudice. Furthermore, he paused, 6 eyes fixed upon the human woman who had just dismantled the impossible. The tribunal wishes to understand how this was accomplished. Commander Vasquez looked up at the High Arbiter. For a moment, something flickered across her face, something old and sad and knowing. Do you really want to know? Kethvorin's scales shifted again. The tribunal believes this knowledge may be relevant to future deliberations. All right, Commander. Vasquez stepped out of the combat circle, leaving the scattered remains of the executioner behind. But it's going to take a little context. She walked toward the center of the chamber, where a holographic display system waited for presenter input. With a few gestures, she activated it. The Dreth attacked the pylori system because the pylori were considered pre-development. Too primitive to resist, too valuable to ignore. The hegemony planned to integrate them, which, as I understand it, means strip mining their world for resources and absorbing their population as manual labor. The display showed images of the pylori, small delicate beings with iridescent wings and compound eyes. They looked like something from a children's story. Fairy tale creatures with no apparent capacity for violence. We found them first, Commander Vasquez continued. About 8 months before the Dreth patrol arrived, they were terrified of us, reasonably so, given what they'd learned about galactic civilization. They expected us to be like everyone else, to take what we wanted and leave them with nothing. She changed the display. New images appeared, humans walking among pylori settlements, not as conquerors, but as guests. Human engineers working alongside pylori craftsmen. Human doctors treating pylori children. Human soldiers standing guard, while pylori families slept safely for the first time in generations. Instead, we helped them. The observation galleries were silent now. 200 species, watching a story they had never expected to see. We taught them to defend themselves. We gave them technology, not weapons, just tools. Agricultural systems, water purification, medical equipment, things that would help them survive and grow without making them dependent on us. Commander Vasquez's voice softened, and when the Dreth arrived, demanding tribute and promising integration, the pylori asked us for help. Not because they couldn't fight, they could, by then, but because they didn't want to. They'd learned something from us, you see, something important. She looked directly at Ambassador Gorthax, who had not moved since the executioner fell. They learned that strength isn't about how much damage you can do, it's about how much you can protect. The display changed again. This time, It showed the battle, the engagement that had destroyed the Dreth patrol fleet. 47 hegemony vessels, weapons charged, descending on the Pelori homeworld, and between them and their target, a single human ship. The UDES Compassion, Commander Vasquez said. That was our ship's name. We chose it deliberately. Because that's what we were defending. The recording showed what happened next. The Dreth fleet opened fire. The Compassion should have been destroyed in the first volley, a single vessel against 47, outnumbered and outgunned by every conceivable measure. Instead, the Compassion moved. It danced through the Dreth formation like light through water. Never where the enemy expected, always exactly where it needed to be. Its weapons, those primitive kinetic launchers, those crude nuclear devices, found every weakness, exploited every gap, struck with precision that seemed almost supernatural. 47 Dreth vessels, 12,000 warriors, 1 human ship. The battle lasted 11 minutes. We don't like fighting, Commander Vasquez said as the recording ended. We're not good at it the way some species are. We don't have natural weapons, or armored hides, or psychic abilities, or any of the other advantages evolution gave the rest of you. She turned to face the arbiters. But we've been fighting since the day we climbed down from the trees. Fighting predators, fighting each other. Fighting the weather, the wilderness, disease, starvation, extinction. Every generation of humanity has faced something that should have destroyed us. Her voice grew quiet, but somehow it carried further than before. And every generation, we've found a way to survive. Not because we're stronger, or faster, or smarter than our enemies, but because when everything else fails, when there's no logical path to victory, when every calculation says we should give up and die, we find something inside ourselves that refuses to accept defeat. She pointed at the scattered remains of the executioner. Your machine was impressive, powerful, well-designed, despite those heat dissipation issues. Against almost any species in the galaxy, it would have been unstoppable. Commander Vasquez smiled. But you built it to fight the kind of enemy you understand. The kind that calculates odds, assesses risks, makes rational decisions about survival. The kind that would look at your champion and recognize that fighting was pointless. She let the smile fade. We're not that kind of enemy. When you threaten what we love, when you come for the people we've sworn to protect, we do UN calculate, we don't assess. We don't make rational decisions. Her eyes met Gorthax's compound gaze directly. We just decide that you're not going to hurt them, and then we make it true, no matter what it costs. No matter what stands in our way, no matter how impossible it seems. The silence in the chamber was absolute. That's what happened to your fleet, Ambassador. They came to hurt the Pelori. We decided they wouldn't. Everything else was just details. Ambassador Gorthax stood motionless for a long time. His mandibles had stopped moving entirely. His war posture had collapsed into something smaller, something uncertain. For the first time in his life, the representative of the Dreth hegemony looked fragile. He struggled to find words. You could have destroyed us. At any point during this trial, you could have killed me, killed my warriors, killed everyone in this chamber who posed a threat to humanity. It wasn't a question. Commander Vasquez nodded. Yes, but you didn't. You came here alone. You let us bring our champion, our weapons, our accusations. You stood in that circle and let the executioner attack you, over and over, when you could have ended it with a thought. Yes, why? The word hung in the air like a prayer. Commander Vasquez was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. When she spoke, her voice was gentle. Because destroying you wouldn't have taught anyone anything. She gestured toward the observation galleries, toward the hundreds of species who had come to witness humanity's judgment. They needed to see this. Not humans winning a fight, that's not special. Lots of species can win fights. They needed to see humans choosing not to fight until we had no other option. They needed to see us restrain ourselves when we could have lashed out. They needed to see that our strength isn't just about destruction. She turned back to Gorthax. The Dreth came to the Pelori system expecting submission. When they didn't get it, they attacked. That's your pattern. It's how you've built your entire empire. Threaten, intimidate, conquer. You assume everyone else operates the same way, just at different levels of capability. Commander Vasquez shook her head. But we don't want to conquer you, Ambassador, we never did. We just want you to stop hurting people who can't protect themselves. Gothax's mandibles twitched. The hegemony has built its power over millennia. We cannot simply change. You can. Commander Vasquez stepped closer to him, close enough to touch, if she'd wanted to. Every species in this galaxy has darkness in its history. Humans, more than most, probably. But we learned something, eventually. Something important. She reached out and placed one hand on the ambassador's armored shoulder. The measure of a species isn't what it's capable of doing. It's what it chooses to do. Gorthak stared at her, his compound eyes designed to track prey across thermal spectrums, to identify weakness and exploit vulnerability. Saw something they couldn't process. A predator who had chosen to stop hunting. The hegemony, his voice cracked. The hegemony would be seen as weak. Other powers would attack us. Without our reputation, without your reputation for cruelty, Commander Vasquez interrupted gently. You might find that other species are willing to work with you instead of against you. You might discover that there are forms of strength the Dreth have never even imagined. She released his shoulder and stepped back. That's your choice, Ambassador. You can go home and tell your people that humans are dangerous, that we are a threat to be feared and eventually destroyed. You can spend the next century building bigger weapons and planning your revenge. Her eyes met his. Or you can go home and tell them the truth. That you met a species that could have destroyed you and chose mercy instead. That you found a form of strength that doesn't require victims. That there's a better way to live in this galaxy, if you're brave enough to try it. High Arbiter, Kethforan's voice broke the silence. The tribunal has rendered its judgment. All charges against humanity are dismissed. The Dreth hegemony is ordered to withdraw from the Pelori system immediately and permanently. Furthermore, he paused, scales cycling through colors that the behavioral analysts would later identify as hope. The tribunal recommends that the Galactic Accords be amended to include humanity as a participating observer, with full diplomatic recognition and the rights thereto. The observation galleries erupted, but this time, the sound wasn't outrage or confusion. It was something closer to relief. 3 hours later, Commander Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the human diplomatic vessel. Watching the tribunal station recede into the star-speckled darkness, that was quite a performance. She turned to find Ambassador Chen, humanity's senior diplomatic representative, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one, and joined her at the viewport. It wasn't a performance, she said. I meant every word. I know. Chen sipped his coffee, his expression thoughtful. That's what made it work. The Drath have dealt with liars and manipulators before they would have seen through anything fake. But, genuine conviction. That's something they've never encountered. Commander Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Do you think Gorthax will actually change? Will the hegemony? Probably not immediately. Maybe not ever. Chen shrugged. But some of them will. Some of them saw what you did today, and realized there's another way to exist. That's how change happens, not all at once, but one converted heart at a time. And if they don't change, if they keep hurting people, Chen looked at her with something like pride. Then we'll be there, same as always. Doing whatever it takes to protect the people who can't protect themselves. Commander Vasquez nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the distant stars. The executioner was genuinely impressive, you know. 3 years of development. The best engineering the hegemony could produce. And it never came close to touching me. Are you surprised? She considered the question. No, just reminded of why we do what we do. Of what humans are capable of when we decide something matters. She finished her coffee and set the cup aside. I wonder if they'll ever really understand. The Dreth, the Arbiters, all of them. I wonder if they'll ever grasp what makes us different. Ambassador Chen smiled. I hope so, he said. I really do, because the alternative is that they'll keep testing us, keep pushing, keep threatening the people we've sworn to protect. He paused, and eventually, they'll push too far. And then, all those carefully restrained capabilities you just demonstrated will be aimed at them without hesitation. and the galaxy will learn the real lesson we've been trying to avoid teaching. Commander Vasquez looked at him sharply, which is. Chun's smile faded. That the scariest thing in the universe isn't a weapon of war. It's a human being who has nothing left to lose, and something to fight for. 6 months later, the first Dreth ambassador arrived on Earth. He was young, by hegemony standards, barely 4 centuries old, with mandibles still soft from his final molting. He had volunteered for the posting against the strong objections of his family, who considered humanity too dangerous and too unpredictable to risk contact with. His name was Thax Vure, and he had been in the observation galleries when Commander Vasquez dismantled the executioner with her bare hands. He had not been able to stop thinking about it since the human diplomatic compound was smaller than he expected. A modest building of white stone and transparent panels, surrounded by gardens that bloomed with flowers in colors the Dreth I could barely perceive. There were no weapons emplacements, no defensive shields, no military vessels lurking in orbit. Just a building, and the humans who lived in it. Ambassador Chen met him at the entrance with a warm smile and an extended hand. Thax Vure had studied human customs carefully. He knew the gesture indicated peaceful intentions. He reached out with his own manipulator limb and attempted the grip. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador Thax Vure. We're honored by your visit. I am honored to be here." Thax Vure's translator rendered his words with careful precision. "Though I confess, I am still struggling to understand." To understand what? Thax Vure looked around at the compound, at the gardens, at the humans going about their daily business with no apparent concern for the alien predator who had just arrived in their midst. "To understand why you would welcome me," he said. "The hegemony attacked your allies. We tried to destroy your people. We brought our greatest weapon to kill your champion. And yet here I am, being greeted as a friend." Ambassador Chun's smile softened. "Would you like to take a walk? I find that difficult conversations are easier when you're moving." They walked through the gardens as the Earth's sun began its descent toward the horizon. Thax Vure's compound eyes struggled to process the colors, so many shades of green and gold and rose, that his visual cortex ached with the effort. "You asked why we welcome you," Chen said eventually. "The answer is simple, though I suspect it won't be satisfying. Tell me anyway, because you came." Thax Vure's mandibles clicked in confusion. "I don't understand. You're here. You volunteered for this posting, against the objections of your family and the suspicion of your government. You walked into what your people consider the most dangerous place in the galaxy, with no weapons and no guarantee of safety." Chen stopped and turned to face the young ambassador directly. "That takes courage, Thax Vure, real courage. The kind that has nothing to do with physical strength or military capability. You came because you wanted to understand, because you believed there might be something here worth learning." He reached out and placed a hand on the Dreth ambassador's armored shoulder, the same gesture Commander Vasquez had used with Gorthax. "That's all we've ever asked of anyone. Not submission, not tribute, not fear, just a willingness to try. A willingness to believe that things can be better." Thax Vure was quiet for a long time. When the executioner fell, he said finally, "I felt something I had never experienced before. Not fear. I had felt fear many times. This was different. It was." He searched for the word. "Wonder. I felt wonder. Because I realized, in that moment, that everything I had been taught about strength was wrong." He looked at Chen with eyes that had been designed for hunting prey but were now seeing something entirely new. "I want to learn," he said. "I want to understand how humans became what you are. How you found the strength to be gentle. How you learned that protecting others is more powerful than destroying them." Ambassador Chen smiled again, but this time, there was something deeper in his expression. Something like hope. "Then stay," he said. "Learn, grow. And when you go home, teach what you've discovered. Help your people become what they're capable of being, and if they won't listen, then come back. You're welcome here, Thax Vure, for as long as you need." The Dreth ambassador stood in the fading light of an alien sun, surrounded by gardens he couldn't fully perceive, in the company of a species his people had tried to destroy. And for the first time in his long life, he felt something he had never expected to feel on an enemy world. He felt home. Centuries later, when the galactic archives compiled their historical records of humanity's integration into civilized space, they would mark this day as the turning point. Not the Battle of Pelori, though that would be remembered too. Not the trial before the tribunal, though scholars would study Commander Vasquez's words for generations. Not even the fall of the executioner, though that moment would become the subject of countless artistic interpretations across 1,000 worlds. No, the historians would mark this day the day a young Dreth ambassador walked through human gardens and felt for the first time that he was home. Because that was the real lesson humanity had taught the galaxy. Not that humans were dangerous, though they were. Not that humans were capable of impossible feats, though they proved that repeatedly. Not that humans would protect the innocent at any cost, though that remained forever true. The lesson was simpler than that. Deeper, more profound. The lesson was that strength without compassion is just violence. That power without mercy is just tyranny. That the greatest civilizations are built not by those who conquer, but by those who choose, again and again, to extend their hand instead of their fist. Humanity had learned this lesson the hard way, through millennia of suffering and struggle and slow, painful growth. They had crawled up from the darkness of their own nature, fighting every step, until they finally understood what it meant to be truly strong. And now, they were teaching that lesson to the stars. One converted heart at a time. As Commander Vasquez had said during her speech that would be quoted in diplomatic texts for centuries to come, the measure of a species isn't what it's capable of doing. It's what it chooses to do. Humanity chose compassion. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. If this story moved you, subscribe for more human stories from the stars, because somewhere out there, among the infinite darkness, humanity is still teaching the universe what it means to be kind.